Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the Mr. Fix-It channel. Well, it's another day and another Polaris. Stay tuned.
I was sitting out there in the shed one evening, not doing too much of nothing, just kind of staring at the wall and...
Well, if you guys are familiar with my channel, you'll know this scrambler here. And yeah, this is its twin brother, twin cousin. But I got the plastics, I got the seat, the clutch cover, two front wheels for it, a gas tank, no gas cap. The mud guards have been cut off. Yay. They've been painted. Don't paint your plastics, guys. Don't do that. Got the exhaust, and as far as this goes, I have an engine and transmission, all the suspension, brakes, missing an oil tank and a CDI box. I have the pull cover right there. Yeah, this thing may be even a bigger pile than the last one I bought. So these 400 two-strokes are notorious for the piston skirts breaking off, and they fall into the crankcase while the engine's running. The piston bits try to find their way out of the crankcase down there, and unfortunately that's what's happened to this one. If I zoom in here, that is an ocean of JB Weld on the back of this crankcase. But it does seem like it may have had a top end done, because it does rotate and does have signs of compression. My goal here is to, I don't know if I'm going to build this quad. I just don't know yet, because I already got the other one. Spare parts is kind of what I'm after here. Know what I'm saying? So I think my project here, I'm going to pull that engine off of there, take it in there on the bench, and I'm going to completely disassemble this thing, and I'm going to find out how bad the engine's broken. If I can get that JB Weld off of there, I don't know. I need to know what I got in the engine. Transmission seems to work, although I can't spin it over because the brake disc is, you know, naturally Loctited to the caliper. So I'm going to leave that alone for now. I think that's okay. It does seem to shift. And I don't feel any play in this bushing, and the carburetor has definitely been out in the weather way too long. I'm not sure what happened here exactly, but that doesn't look right. I think something's wrong with that. So I need to pull that bolt out, get this clutch off, get that clutch off. Hopefully all this stuff will play nice. And yank that engine off. I'm not going to show any of that because you guys have seen me do this a bunch. And if you want to know how this stuff comes off, I'll link to a playlist right up there. Alright, who can tell me what they see wrong here? This is the exhaust port. Notice something wrong there? If it did run, it couldn't have run well. Alright, I just want to start tearing this engine apart. I want to find out what I have here, what parts are good, what parts are bad. My first thought when I bought this quad was to go ahead and just build it, but I don't know, it's kind of far gone. It's more far gone than the last Scrambler I picked up. But that being said, let's go ahead and take this engine apart, see what's all in here, see what's good, what's bad, what's ugly. There's a few broken bolts in this case, so that'll have to be addressed. First thing I want to do is I'm going to go and pull this flywheel off. So that's a 22mm. Let's get that nut off of there. Okay, so the holes in this flywheel for installing the puller, they're metric threads. They're M8 by 125, and this is very close to the Imperial thread 5/16 18 or 5/16 National Course thread. So don't let that, don't make that mistake and try to thread a 5/16 bolts in these and wreck these threads. So I'm just running a tap through them because there's some rust in there, and get these holes cleaned out so I can install the flywheel puller. This tool is a harmonic balancer puller for old V8 engines. You can rent this from AutoZone. Just want to thread all these in there so that they're even, so that it pulls straight out. Don't thread these in too far because you do have the stator coils behind there and you don't want to screw into those. So just run them in by hand. The threads aren't very deep in this, so you don't have to have them too far down in there. Just make sure you're pretty much all the way through and tighten that up, and I'm going to hit that with an impact. Sometimes you have problems. These will be stuck on here. You can try heating it up, or once you get this tight, you can strike this in with a hammer. You know, hit the tool, not the flywheel, and that'll sometimes knock it loose. You just got to keep trying. Alright, that looks like a usable flywheel. There is a bit of that magnet gone there and a little chip gone there, but the magnets are all still glued in tight, so I think that's usable. Set that over there. Looks like this timing plate's been replaced because it's the same. It's not the same color and it's got the wrong bolts in it. Looks like this thing has been replaced, so we'll go ahead and get this out of there. Well, I hope that's not broke off in there. Oh my god. Those are 1/4-20s. That's the wrong bolt. So these threads in here are probably wrecked. Probably gonna need helicoils. These engines are Japanese made. So all the nuts and bolts on this engine are metric. So if you find standard fasteners threaded in anywhere on this, that's the wrong bolt. Someone jammed whatever bolt they could find down in there and wrecked the threads. So be aware of that. Looks like we got a good stator. Yeah, that bolt's broke off. That bolt's broke off. Oh my. And this is where I was saying where I don't know if I'm going to build this quad, because this one is, the last one was pretty bad, but this one yeah. So I got to get that nut off of there. So I have not bought the special tool for this nut. I just made one out of some 1/4-inch key stock and a socket. Yeah, it's kind of crazy looking, but it does get this on and off of here. I'll put a part number for this tool right up here. And I can't remember if this is left-handed or right-handed threads. It looks like it's left-handed threads, so turn it to the right to get this loose. Loosen these hose clamps. So we got some 12mm head bolts in here and a few 10mm head bolts. Okay, you got to take this bottom engine mount off. Now the only bolts in this engine that are Imperial or standard or SAE or whatever you want to call them are the engine mount bolts. So there's 2 engine mount plates. They both have 3 bolts in them. These are standard. So this one bolt threads into this balancer shaft cover, so we got to at least take that one out, but I'm going to go ahead and take the whole mount off. These are 9/16. Alright, there is 3 drains on the bottom of these 400 engines. You got one for the crankcase. There shouldn't be anything in there. That's just in case the engine got flooded or submerged. Then you have this one over here. This is for the balance shaft oil. There should be about 100 cc's of 10W30 motor oil in that one. Now over here you have another drain screw. This is for the pole start cover, and there should be nothing in this. This should be just in case the engine got submerged underwater. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the one for the balance shaft. And if the seals are good and the crankcase isn't busted into the balance shaft, there should be oil in this, which I'm expecting there to be a bunch of, I'm expecting this engine to be pretty much destroyed. So there is oil on the screw, so that's a good sign. Let me grab something to drain this into. Yep, that's what I figured, it's empty. I kind of figured that much when I saw the JB weld. Alright, just a quick look, see if I got all the bolts out. I think that's all of it. Nope, missing one right. I gotta get that one out. Gasket came off in one piece. That's interesting. That never happens. Let's feel this bearing. That bearing's good. Water pump impeller looks good. There's no rust or corrosion going on in here, so that's a good sign. So you'll have these collars. There's going to be 2 of these, and there's going to be an O-ring under them. And these are what seal these 2 compartments from each other. So you can see there's a collar and an O-ring, and there's this little washer. So you always have to have this part stack up. There's going to be one on the outside and one on the underneath this gear here. Okay, we got to get the water pump impeller out. That's a 10 millimeter. A lock washer and a flat washer underneath the nut. Now we can pull the water pump housing out, or should be able to pull the water pump housing out. There it comes. Okay, you want to check this bearing here. That bearing feels good. And you also want to check this shaft, because this shaft right here is known for being damaged. And these shafts they're starting to become kind of scarce anymore, these balance shafts. So let's get this gasket out of the way. This looks like the factory gasket, so I'm probably the first person inside here. Okay, now we gotta get this gear out. Usually they just pull right up, but if there's any corrosion going on in here, there is 3 holes in this to use that same harmonic balancer puller. You just gotta get really long bolts. And they look like M6 bolts. Let me just check that real quick. Yep, M6. You need real long M6 bolts, and you can pull this off with that harmonic balancer puller. Alright, we got a couple 10 millimeters here. We're going to pull the balance shaft out. Alright, same thing here, M6 bolts. This balance shaft is a press fit, so we got to drive it out with a slide hammer. You can get these slide hammers with these types of pullers on them. You can rent these from AutoZone, I believe. If not, you can just buy one. But you need some sort of slide hammer to get this out. Just thread those in, make sure they're even so you're pulling straight out on it. And then this is my makeshift slide hammer deal. And you can pull the balance shaft right out. Okay, I don't see, yeah. So it may just be the outside of the case that's broke, which, if that's the case, I was expecting to see the crankcase broken right inside here. And it's not. So it may just be the case that's broke on the back side back here, which is a lot easier fixed than trying to fix this. Alright, well, it's like a roller coaster, ups and downs here. Alright, get the exhaust manifold out of the way. These are 13s, and these are brass nuts, so they can strip out real easy. So you kind of want to look at this. Remember the orientation of this exhaust. Looks like it's pointing down towards the clutch. I'll just put these back on here so they don't get misplaced somewhere. Okay, let's go ahead and get this oil pump out of here. These are 8 millimeter. This thing looks like it had been disconnected and was running premix in it. That's usually the case because, from my understanding, the factory cast pistons in these engines were prone to breaking the skirts off, and I'm guessing, ew, well, that's gross. So yeah, they've bypassed this. So I think what happens a lot of times is that cast piston breaks and they assume it's the oil injection system that failed, and they just bypass this thing. I've not had any problems with it yet. I'm sure one day I will, but so far I've been lucky. I like the oil injection system, it's handy, but let me get you in here. So yeah, it looks like the inside of the Titanic in there. I've revived these before, but you just use your best judgment if you want to attempt to reuse this. And of course this cable is seized in there, so that's going to require some attention. I'm going to go ahead and assume the screws are probably stuck, so let me get my impact driver, see if we can get these off. Tell you what, let me grab a pick and we'll pick the dirt out of these screw heads so we have the best chance to getting these screws loose. Okay, that one came right loose. That one's loose. Pick more crud out of that one. Because of the nature of having a steel bolt threaded into an aluminum housing, is that these bolts tend to want to seize in, and you really need a tool like this to get these loose. Try going at it with just a regular screwdriver and you're going to have issues. I need a longer shank screwdriver, which I don't have because I broke it last time I used it. Alright, let me modify this and I'll put a longer shank in that. and get that last screw out. All right, something more like that. Oh, it's stripped out. Well, that's unfortunate. So this screw may be getting drilled out. Just trying to drive that screwdriver down in that screw and get some kind of grab on it, which I don't think is gonna work. I'm probably gonna drill this out. All right, let's put something in the exhaust port so we don't get metal chips in there. And I got a 1/4 inch drill bit. Well, my drill bit's a little dull. I might have to go sharpen it. So there's the head of the screw. We got that washer. There's a lock washer underneath each one of these. So we'll try to get that off of there. Okay, this should come loose now. Well, hold on. Getting ahead of myself here. I'm gonna get the other 2 screws out. Then we can tap on this. Ew. Okay. Oh, that's gross inside there. Now I should be able to just grab this screw with these vice grips, and it should just unthread out of there. There we go. Oh, that is gross. Yuck. Alright, we got 2 more screws in the oil pump that are buried in this muck. Looks like pond scum. Oh, that's disgusting. I don't even like touch it. Gross. Alright. See if we can get these 2 screws broke loose. Oh my god. Oh, it just stripped. Striking out here. Yeah, they're just stripping out. Everything's corroded and rusted and disgusting. I go sharpen my drill bit real quick and we'll have to drill those 2 screws out too. Oh, I didn't get that one drilled straight. It slipped on me. Whoa. Alright, let's see if the oil pump will come loose. Yeah, good deal. Okay, we got the line, gotta take this off. Of course the spring clip on there is rusted off. I would say more often than not these oil pump failures is because of this right here that you're looking at. Lack of maintenance. There is a seal that goes around the cap to this, but it looks like someone's been in this before, and you're supposed to put silicone around the base of this, and if you don't, then every puddle you hit is going to splash mud and water right into this thing, and it's going to destroy the oil injector. So we're going to dig that little O-ring out of there. This itself may be okay. Usually the spring rusts and it won't return the cable properly, but that's looking bad. That's horrible. All right, let's see if we can get the rest of these screws out. They should just thread right out of there. Of course I said that, now they won't. Yep, there's that one. So what you can do if you want to delete this oil injection, you can do a couple of things. If you leave this pump in, or let me back up. So the balance shaft oil comes up to this hole right here because it's got to lube this gear. If you want to delete this thing, you can leave this in, but punch out that roll pin right there and take this gear off of the shaft. And then put this back in. That'll seal this up. Or you can take this completely out and put a plate, what they call a block off plate, over this so nothing gets in there and the oil stays in there. So it's a couple things you can do if you want to delete this. These are M5 screws, by the way. Alright, I'm not going to worry about cleaning this up too much because I'm going to completely strip this engine, and I gotta clean everything up in the parts washer and see how bad the engine case is broken. What I want to do, I want to pull these Woodruff keys out real quick so that they don't get misplaced. I think that one's fine to stand, but we'll take this one out I'm going to stick it to the magnet to the flywheel so it won't get lost. And I'm going to take the top end apart. And someone threaded a Champion plug in there, and that's completely the wrong spark plug. I'm hoping like the piston broke and they went and replaced the whole top end, new piston, new cylinder. We'll see once we get in here. So when you take this cylinder head loose, you want to loosen the nuts a little at a time and go in a crisscrossing pattern, because these cylinder heads are very prone to warpage, and you want to do everything you can to keep from warping this head. So I'm just going to go in a crisscross and just loosen a little bit. What would be really cool is if I find a Wiseco piston in here. Okay, looks like the head has been resurfaced, so that's probably flat. We can check that later. There's been 0 run time on that head gasket, and that makes sense because they did put the piston in here backwards. So let's get the base bolts. It's definitely an aftermarket piston. This could be a Wiseco piston. So hopefully there's a good cylinder and piston here. Let's see, what are these, 14s? Like I was saying at the beginning of this video, I don't think this engine ever ran after they put the top end together, because the piston was in backwards. If it did run, it couldn't have run much. Like, I'm not seeing any carbon or nothing. And if you don't understand why, I'll show you here as soon as I get this apart. Okay, here's another thing you want to... Wow, okay, maybe they just did this because they deleted the oil injector, but someone threaded an actual screw into that hole, into the intake manifold, and that's supposed to be a banjo fitting. Oil can't flow through that without. This is why I make videos like this, so people understand how these engines work, and they don't make mistakes like this that can potentially destroy, well, this wouldn't potentially, this would destroy this engine. See, that's supposed to be a special banjo bolt to allow oil to pass through that. Alright, so the cylinder looks great. Still has crosshatch in it. I don't think this was ran. I think it was rebuilt. They put the piston in wrong. And I think any of the scoring that's in here is just from debris being in there and people cranking it over, thinking that they can get it to start. And it's possible this quad exchanged hands multiple times and nobody could get it to run. And the reason for that is, you can see these 2 ports on this piston. This goes towards the intake side. These ports are there to allow fuel to come through. So you can see these 2 ports right in here. That's where those ports line up with. You can see the 2 little ones and the 2 big ones just below it. These 2 ports in the piston, air fuel gets drawn in through these 2 ports, and if they're on the wrong side, it's not going to draw in. It's not going to draw in much of anything at all. Just feeling for play in the crankshaft, and there is some. All right, let me get the piston off of there. Wow, this is some kind of clip. Never seen one like this before. It goes all the way around and then some. What the heck? I have never seen this style of wrist pin clip before, and it is kind of a pain in the ass. Look at that thing. It has not been ran. Still has all of its machine marks on it. Not sure what I got here. 84 millimeter. It's been bored. So anybody, can I focus on that? If anybody knows what them numbers mean, let me know. So the wear on the crank pin, you know, where the big end of the rod rides, so the engine rotates like this, in this direction, and all the force, well, I shouldn't say all the force, the main force is going to be as it cranks over and starts to go down from the compression stroke. Right in this area is where you're going to see it's about 45 degrees from top dead center, and that's where all the wear is going to happen on that pin. So if you want to, so you rotate this crank over to about 45 degrees, and that's where you want to check your crank bearing play. And I can feel just a little bit. You shouldn't feel any up and down movement in that at all. So you can roll it up top dead center, and you may not feel any movement in that bearing. but that's where you want to check it at. Check it everywhere, but that's where the majority of your play is going to be. I don't know if you can hear that rod knock or not. So this needs a crankshaft, or at least a new rod and rod bearing and a new pin. It would probably run like this, but it's going to knock. You hear that? So that's unfortunate, but it looks like I have basically a rebuilt top end, so that's a bonus. So when you buy one of these 400s, you always want to look. This is, the carburetor is going to sit right here underneath the carburetor. There's your balance shaft oil dipstick. You want to inspect this area. If it's got JB weld on it, then it's been blown up before, or if there's any cracks or splits or holes in the case, you always want to look right here first. This will tell you if the crankcase is any good or not. So not only did they slather it with JB weld, they also slathered the dipstick with JB weld. So it's kind of like a spray and pray deal here. So the parting line is right here. I don't know. I'm hoping that once I get all the bolts loose and start to separate that JB weld will just crack right there, and I won't have to chip that off to get this apart. So let's go ahead and start taking the crankcase bolts out. So these are 12mm. You got one there, and down there. This one I already took loose because it had the ground cable on it. And I almost forgot, we also got to take this engine mount off because it's holding the two case halves together. I'll just stick these back in here for now. So I already sneaked a peek down inside there. There's a big chunk of the case missing. See, we got a 10mm there, a 10mm right there. And I believe that's all of them. Now I'm just gonna gently start trying to tap this thing apart here. Yep, came right apart. Oh boy. So you can see the big chunk missing out of the case there, and I don't know what they used to cover it up with. That looks like a Mountain Dew can, or maybe a Faygo lime drink soda can. Well, that's unfortunate. Let's see, what's the other case look like? I may have to take it over to the press to get this side off. So there's a little bit of dirt and corrosion built up on this crankshaft where the clutch goes on. Clean that off before you start pushing that through there. It'll make it a lot easier to come out. It looks like this is cracked all the way up into here. So this probably isn't savable. As far as the crankshaft's concerned, it looks usable, just needs new rod and rod bearing. So overall, I've got the balance shaft cover has broken bolts in it. It's going to be a whole job to get those drilled out and rethreaded. This is the right side crankcase. It's got a big chunk missing out of it. That's no good. Left side case, it's not missing any chunks, but it does have some hairline cracks in it. And that might be bulged out right there just a little bit. So that's pretty much junk. The crankshaft is rebuildable. The balance shaft looks like it's in good shape. Bearing still spins nice and free. There's no rust. The water pump sealing surface isn't gouged or marred. I got a good flywheel. I got a good cylinder head, good cylinder, and a good piston. I got what looks like to be a brand new stator. So there's some good parts here, although it would be kind of expensive to rebuild this because I need the crankcase. If I had a TIG welder and knew how to use it well, I could fix this engine case, but TIG welders are expensive and learning how to use them takes a long time, especially when you're trying to weld cast aluminum. I might be able to find a guy that can weld this up for me. Depending on what he would charge, it may be cheaper to do it that way than to just buy two new cases, because it's going to need crank bearings, all new gaskets, seals. It needs a starter. It needs a bunch of work is what I'm getting at. So I don't know if this engine is going to be economical to rebuild. I do have a good water pump, So this Scrambler may just be spare parts because it is a twin to the one I've already got. I may just keep these as spare parts. I haven't decided yet. Look at all the carnage. So, after assessing all these parts, did I waste my money? No, because this is a brand new Wiseco piston. Got a freshly milled head and a freshly bored cylinder. This is not ran yet because they had the piston in backwards. I don't think it would even start. And bonus, Boyson reeds. So there's more than my money back just right there. And plus all the other parts, like this part here, this is in good shape. That's getting kind of hard to find, hard to come by. I got the whole quad. So yeah, this was a score. Whenever you buy a used project for cheap, like a basket case project, something that's been sitting outside for years, you never know what you're going to get into, and you really need to tear the engine apart. Take things apart. Don't just try to put some gas in it and try to run it. This one was never going to run. Piston was in backwards. Even if it did start, it was probably going to destroy itself. So keep that in mind if you're going to buy a project. It's so hard when you're standing there talking to the person, you're in the heat of the moment, you might be a little bit excited, you might be a little nervous, trying to look at everything, trying to get every detail of what's wrong with the machine before you purchase it. When I buy projects like this, I won't spend a lot of money. That last one I paid $200 for, that was the top. Like I wouldn't have paid no more than $200 for that quad. This one was cheaper. I'm not going to tell you what I paid for it, but this one was cheaper than that, and it's got a lot more wrong with it. I knew that going into the deal because just by looking at the pictures and seeing how far it was sunk into the dirt, and you know, you kind of get an idea after doing this a few times. Make sure you do your due diligence. Try to look at everything you possibly can and try to do some calculations in your head. How much is it going to cost to fix this? Or if you're just looking for parts, what parts are good, what parts are bad, and kind of gauge how much it would cost to replace these parts off of just going like on the internet and buying them, as opposed to buying this whole quad as a whole piece. What parts and pieces do you need? So pretty much this engine is not totaled, but it's real close to being completely totaled. It can be repaired, it can be rebuilt, depends on how much time and money you want to spend. I don't know if I'm going to spend the time and money on this. I'm going to have to do some research, look and see what the parts are going to cost and stuff. I would like to have a spare engine, but if not, I got spare parts. So if you guys like this video, please give me a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and don't be afraid to fix it. Thanks for watching.